Good morning, Bitcoiners. Good morning from Lévis. I used to love that boat. I would take it for fun between Quebec City and Lévis. If you guys out there don't know, one of the best views in the world comes from the town of Levi's, if you're American, and that's how you'd want to spell it. In French, we'd say Lévis. B from Victory from Lévis. It's right across the water from Quebec City, and they get to enjoy the view. There was a joke years ago about building, instead of Lévis, that Quebecers would build Quebec City people were going to build a big mirror where the town of Lévis was so they could look at themselves because it's such a nice view. If you didn't know, Quebec City is built on top of a huge cliff structure, and it's still a walled city. It's the Star Fort is there, and all of the ramparts are still there, and it's a pretty amazing place. And Lévis, on the other side of the river, gets this view of it, and so it was really a joke in the old days about getting rid of the town of Levi's, and putting up a mirror, a giant mirror. If you guys also want to hear another fun story about it, when they do the Carnival in Quebec, don't forget, Quebec is part of Latin America. And so they have a Carnival. It's just not like the one you have down here in the Caribbean with all of the nudity, because it's really cold. But it's a hell of a party. It's a great time. I did it for years. The only problem with it is they have like these big plastic horns, and they just don't stop. So I started leaving in the end because it's like 2 weeks of horns and all that. But they got all kinds of outdoor games. They had, when I was there, where they have all these bars. They had, this is exactly why it's different from the rest of Canada. You would never see this. They had ice sculptures of human bodies, and one of them was of a woman, and it's all ice, but they had made channels so that you could put like alcohol into the mouth of the ice sculpture, and it would come out other body parts, if you know what I mean. And you could, like, that's how you got shots, and it was fun when you were in college. And so here's the story that I want to tell, though, about Carnival. They have all these sports things in the day, competitions and all that. One of them is to get across the river on the ice floes with canoes. So teams actually race from Quebec City and the base across the river over to Lévis, and they have these boats, and you run it when you're on top of an ice flow, and you get in the water when you don't, and it's cold. And the ice flows coming are dangerous. So that the ferry, there is a ferry, like a public, it's like a bus or whatever, and it crosses from Lévis to Quebec City every day, or every whatever 15, 20 minutes, and it's an icebreaker, so it smashes the ice. So that's why you have all these flows there, and it's a hell of a competition. I never did it. You got to train, you got to do all kinds of crazy stuff. I used to go watch it, though. Pretty neat. All right, we got a lot to talk about today, guys. This might be one of the most fun shows ever. And just so we can get to all the news, I just got to remind you, I noticed the sun was up this morning. And if you look at the picture today, it's really cool. There's a horse coming down the road. Sometimes that happens. I hear the hooves in the morning. We got a racetrack not far from us, and they come and bathe the horses. You can swim with them anytime. Horses, if you didn't know, are amazing swimmers. I had no idea. I've gone swimming them many times here in the water, and if you put your goggles on underneath, you see their arms going through the water. They can only make it, they go out deep, like over their head, but they can't go long, as you can imagine. They can swim for like 5 minutes, and they got to come back, but it's neat to see. So one of the horses was getting ridden down here to go for a swim this morning, early in the morning. That's how they bathe them. Pretty fun stuff. So the sun is indeed up, right? I checked. Bitcoin's running, guys. We're good. We got no problems, right? Let's have a coffee and talk about the crazy world that we have. So let me get a couple more good mornings. We love Lévis. Thanks for joining this morning. Rickster Swickster, morning, my man. Morning, morning, morning. Bon matin too. Indeed, bon matin. That's another thing they only say in Quebec. They don't say that bon matin in France, by the way. If anyone's wondering about the differences, I liken Quebec not to American English as, the American British thing, right? American English, British English. People think of Quebec as like American French. It's not. It's Scottish. Scottish is to French as Quebecois. Scottish is to English as Scottish English is to English as Quebecois French is to France French. That's what I think. Good morning, Dex. Indeed, the best views of the castle. Yeah, it is pretty neat to see from there. He's talking about the Quebec City situation. And yeah, Bitcoin's still running, guys. We're good. We're good. We're good. We don't have troubles today. Evening here in Australia. Welcome, Louis. Thanks for staying up. Thanks for staying up. Good morning, CK. What's up, my man? I'll be seeing you later. Good morning, Daniel. Good morning, Bitcoiners, he says. Indeed. David says, oh, Fair Trade Trouser. Good morning from London. We love London. David Tessario says, good morning. The sun is up, Bitcoin is running, but is Greta happy today? We don't really care here, right? But some people might wonder, right? I promise you we'll never make any shows about her relative happiness. We'll comment on her happiness, but, right, she's probably not happy. She's probably not happy. We're going to talk about Trump today. But remember when he used to call her that unhappy girl needs to go to the movies and chill? But he was right. He was right. All right. As you know, we like to start every show with the fakest news we can find. I got a good one today. I got a couple good ones. So this is from the New York Post, right? And they've relied on some science here, guys. Big time science. Big time science. Big time science. And what did science tell us? It says that new research from science, right? New research suggests physical exercise has little mental benefits. So there you go, guys. Don't worry about it. If you're feeling like depressed or low energy, screw it. Don't exercise. Come on, it's for idiots. Stupid people would exercise. What are you talking about? It has no effect on there's no mental benefit from being in shape. None. And in case you're wondering, right, there's no mental benefit for being in shape, but IFL science, right, more science coming at us this morning. What does the science say? Here's what the science people are suggesting, right? To limit our impact on the planet, one solution could be to replace meat with insects. Children could set an example. So they show a child eating a delicious looking grasshopper. It looks amazing. I mean, it's great, right? So the message today from science is exercise. Screw it. Don't need it. It's not going to help your mental health, right? Who cares about that? And kids, let's get them on the crickets, right? Science. Thank you, science. We love you. So good. So good, science. Now, I want to, before we get into there's so much fun stuff today, right? When you do what we do here in the morning, you got a lot of fun stuff. Yeah, good to know, Louis. It's good to know. I got to mention this one because I know I've called him one of the stupidest people in the world before. And I don't really mean it. LeBron James. I don't really mean it. I only meant it when I was a little insulted when he said, they is not reading and they is not learning when he was saying about Trump supporters and things like that. So I took offense to that because he said I is not reading and I didn't like that. But I will say, and I'm going to give him 100% credit on this, he's taken a big interest in education, particularly where he's from in Akron, Ohio. And this is a great thing. And I want to mention it, right? Because I want to give him full credit here. And this is from Philip Lewis saying LeBron James started with a tutoring and college scholarship program in 2011. In 2018, he opened the I Promise School. Today he's growing his I Promise world in Akron, creating a housing complex, a primary care facility, and a job training facility. And I look, that's amazing. And it's the future. And LeBron James is a man ahead of his time here. I've made fun of him trying to get like a Muhammad Ali style biography, and that's how most of his life has been oriented. He wants, people to talk about how great he was. I think it's not going to work in a lot of the things he's done in life, right? I think he was mostly a failure as an activist. But on this stuff, he's got it right on. And if he continues in this way, I would even go to a movie about his life if this ends up becoming his legacy. And it's right in line with what I've been predicting for a while, which is we're going to have these new city type systems out there where we're going to build new cities. The whole Bitcoin monasteries, Bitcoin citadels, they are really going to save people. And I've mentioned a bit about, Trump's Freedom City competition that he has, really great messaging. I do believe there's going to be a Bitcoin citadel as part of the 10 cities that Trump and his presidential candidacy is waiting to have for this competition. So, and I've predicted many times here that the job industry or whatever of the future that we don't see at all today, but it's going to be a primary driver of the economy going forward, is terraformation, engineering of cities from scratch, brand new cities. I think it might be the only solution when you look at the rot that's set into a lot of American cities. I do think we're going to abandon a lot of these. Now, I do imagine we're going to have some kind of a materials revolution, like an industrial materials revolution as well. I think you are going to be able to take sort of like a spray hose with carbon nanotubes or something like that. And you're going to be able to like paint buildings that were falling apart and paint them literally with like a paint, and it will make the building sound again, right? It'll fix the structural elements. But we're a ways away from that. I think we're going to build a few from scratch. I think we're going to let what we have rot, not out of conscious choice. I think it's just going to rot naturally until we have this materials revolution, and it might come from a place that LeBron James is helping invent. Right, one of the people from his Akron thing, I promise, might end up being the person who comes up with these innovations. So I think this is amazing stuff from LeBron James. All he needs to do now is understand Bitcoin's role in the coordination of new cities and citadels and Bitcoin monasteries. And I think we've got a new Bitcoiner in the making here. It might be his on ramp, right? LeBron James might come at this from the city engineering point of view. So just want to say, I've criticized LeBron James before. I take it all back because of what he's doing here. Really, I do. I think it's great. I really do, really do. So amazing stuff. One of those stories that might have got steamrolled and everything that's going on in the world is this, this Elizabeth Warren, her anti-crypto army, right? Everyone's dunking on her. And, she did it even, I make fun of these people who do the face when they're for their profile pic, or you know looking off so dignified into the future. I've always thought that was just sort of ridiculous, right? And I love how her picture in this thing is like her, I'm fighting for your future, I am Elizabeth Warren. So that already was just clown world funny to me. But this whole thing, the rhetoric, I'm building an army, an anti-crypto army, right? Blah, blah, blah. Niraj Agrawal found the army. He found it, right? And there was a whole bunch of memes like, "Is the anti-crypto army in the room here with us?" The one where the Sixth Sense meme, right? That one's pretty good. But Niraj says, "This is the army, by the way," and he has a quote from one of the newspaper articles about this. And he goes, "The progressive Massachusetts Democrat is starting to recruit conservative Senate Republicans to her anti-crypto cause and getting some early positive vibes." Here's the army. This is what Niraj underlined, right? Here's her army. She's getting some early positive vibes from bank lobbyists and those who want to rein in digital asset startups. So good. There's the army. She's building a anti-crypto army, and she's a real despot. And I hope, we're going to talk about the Trump thing in a second. I do hope we get into some lawfare here with states starting to mobilize their own AGs, red versus blue. I'm here for that, right? I want to see like a bunch of frivolous cases now. I want to see American red states indicting all kinds of Democrats, and she's on my list. I don't care why. Do we need a reason anymore to indict people? Let's just go. Let's just what we can find something. I'm sure she did something wrong with the whole thing about lying on her college application, right? Pocahontas. I think it's rude to keep calling her Pocahontas, right? But I think maybe one other state might, Oklahoma or something, where she took some of the banned rights. Maybe there's tribunals in some of these native courts. So I think we have something similar in Canada. So who knows? Let's get some more frivolity out there, right? We love the frivolous stuff. So there you go. Now, we're going to start talking about the Trump thing. So Trump looks like he's going to get indicted in New York, which is hilarious. It's so funny. We love it. But first up, I want to just help you guard and let's say protect you from one of the big fake news and psyop talking points that's being projected and downloaded on all of this rhetoric around Trump, which is no one is above the law. You've heard this. No one is above the law, right? You are not above the law. Trump is not above the law. Well, first of all, being not above the law is a think past the sale move, right? We've talked, Trump is an expert at think past the sale. When you say someone is not above the law, what you end up doing in this case is saying, he's guilty and he's got to face consequences. It forces you to already accept in a way his guilt. So if anyone says not above the law, here's the way to fix it. And it comes from Twitter. Twitter, I've talked a lot about the community notes section in Twitter being so powerful and important. It comes from something they had used in Taiwan. And I'll explain it again here for new listeners who don't know what it's based on. It's an amazing thing. It was one of the first things that Elon Musk instituted when he came into Twitter. And it's the following. So normally, Twitter and most social media sites rewarded trolling in a sense, right? So if a thing got more attention, it would get upvoted or liked or shared, and it would sort of rise to the main counterpoint to whatever a point someone was making. But the problem with that was it necessarily separated things into polarities and extremes. So you would see the most ridiculous response to whatever thing was going on, right? Trump said this, oh my God, he's a Nazi. And then that would get heavily broadcast by people supporting that. So there was an incentive to be on the extremes and never really interact and just see the extreme sides of both things. So what Elon Musk ended up doing with the community notes section is he said, and I guess algorithmically what it does is look at whatever response had enough aggregate cross acceptance, that is, more blue-minded people agreed with a thing and red-minded people agreed with a thing. That would become the community notes section because it shows its ability to be accepted on both sides, not on one side. So it doesn't incentivize trolls. It incentivizes being able to make a point that broadly across a broad group of people is accepted. So not incentivizing extremes, incentivizing a form of compromise. A big change. And I thought it was great at the time. And here's a great example of it working, just a tremendous example of it working, right? And this is what you say to anyone who goes, think past the sale and says, well, no one is above the law, right? So Nancy Pelosi came out and said, the grand jury has acted upon the facts and the law. No one is above the law. And everyone has the right to a trial to prove innocence, right? Well, she's in the Biden brain, not really great, but she gave us all this great opportunity to talk about it. And the community notes said it perfectly. Ms. Pelosi mistakenly says that Trump can prove his innocence at trial. Law in the US assumes innocence of a defendant and the prosecution must prove guilt, right? We all know innocent until proven guilty, right? We all know innocent until proven guilty. So Carl Benjamin, Sargon of Akkad, said the same thing. Prove your innocence, says the world's best insider trader. That's how it works, Nancy. We assume one's innocence and prove their guilt. So that's not how it works, Nancy. He says we assume one's innocence. And indeed, that's the answer here, right? So if anyone says no one is above the law, this was, as we've talked about many times, how information laundering works and how talking points are assigned to people regularly. And we track on here in the morning, we do that a lot, right? We track talking points. We track when something is being repeated by multiple people, and that goes into the whole broadcast information systems that we talk about here a lot. So this is one of those examples. You hear a lot of people saying that no one is above the law. No one is above the law. No one's saying you're above the law. Nobody's saying that they're above the law, right? What they're saying is it's frivolous, and in the case of Trump, and that it's more to make him prove his innocence, right? So there you go. That's just on that. And by the way, if you guys didn't know, just want to follow up on that massive success. This is one of the great successes of the community notes system, right, that I've ever seen, right? This is looks like it's one of those things that was broadly understood. Even supporters of Pelosi would have said, well, not all of them, but as long as it's crossing through, it gets pushed upwards in the Twitter system. And so this is a great example of it. Elon Musk is open sourcing the Twitter algorithm today at like noon, right? We're going to see under the hood for the first time ever. And that's pretty amazing. I mean, today of all days where this is happening is, I think, a great sign. I think it's one of those like minor wins in World War III. And it really will help, I think, crystallize confidence in using, for now, Twitter, despite its problems. I'm sick of seeing the violent videos. Absolutely didn't need to see several points of view of what happened in Tennessee the other day. Police. I mean, it's I don't need that in my life. So, Twitter is not perfect, but I think its credibility as a major battlefront in World War III is strengthened from this. So that's good news, right? That's good news. Now let's get into the Trump stuff. So, New York Times says he will be fingerprinted, he will be photographed, he may even be handcuffed. Now that a Manhattan grand jury has voted to indict Donald Trump, here's what will happen when he's arrested. And you get all kinds of people. This one's great. This is another CBS. So that's the New York Times. I'm gonna do the fake news first, and then I'm gonna do the reactions to it. Right. I want to. So the first fake news one that we need to talk about was that no one is above the law. Right. You're going to hear that a lot. That's a talking point that's been assigned. People are just going to reflexively go, hey, that's what my NPC brain was told to say. No one is above the law. Nobody. Right. When again, no one is above the law, but all anyone is saying is everyone should have the same rights in front of the law. Like that didn't, Hillary had the same exact thing as far as campaign finance through a lawyer and the murkiness. That's what he's being indicted about, right? It's the campaign finance of him paying off the porn star and who did it and did it come from the lawyer, even though we have the lawyer, Michael Cohen, in a previous thing clearly stating that he did it himself. And so the liar lied, Michael Cohen, and now they're going to say that was the lie. And, it's just lies. So that's an important one. So, Hillary had the same thing when it came to the dossier, the Steele dossier, and she had to pay a fine. It's the same thing. It's campaign finance that went through the, what's the law firm? I've booked them for shows before. I stopped even talking to them. I didn't know how bad they were, but some New York City law firm, they had lawyers all the time, and we booked them to talk about Bitcoin and crypto for years. I can't remember the name of the firm. It's a famous one. Anyway, they're the ones who paid. And so when that all came out, that they paid for the Steele dossier, Hillary Clinton had to pay a fine in the same way that it's the same exact case as with Trump. So when people are saying no one's above the law, I think people are saying the law should be blind and treat everyone the same, but we know that's not the case, right? So that's not even what I'm trying to add. The part about no one is above the law, really the goal of that is to push people back this way, push people past the sale, and have people defend Trump's guilt or innocence versus whether or not this is a frivolous case and should have been brought forward in the first place. Anyway, neither here nor there. Here's another one that's amazing, right? So that's one. So the perp walk that New York Times just visualized for us, right? He's going to be fingerprinted. He's going to be handcuffed. Very visual, very persuasive. Here's the other approach they're going to take, right? This is where you're going to get the whole new grift for the next few days. This is the grift for the next few days. I predicted here. This is all you're going to hear about if you ever feel like tuning in for some entertainment and a few laughs on mainstream media. Here's what they're going to be going on about, right? This is from CBS. A longtime aide to former President Trump tells CBS News that Trump's team plans to take a fighting posture against New York grand jury's indictment. It shows that they're digging in terms of trying to push back against the charges. Now, how many people thought, did the NPC audience of the New York Times and CBS think that Trump was just going to like give up? Like he was just going to, I'm guilty. You got me, guys. The walls have actually closed in. You got me. Damn, you got me. Somebody paid the porn star. Oh, you got my career is over. I give up. Right. So like who actually outside of their NPC audience thought that Trump was ever going to go quietly? I mean, is that really a thing? Did people believe that the person who is the most litigious and argumentative person on earth was just going to give up and go? Okay, well, maybe. Now, people say he is going to comply, right? We've got MSNBC saying, right, that he will follow the normal procedures, and they say that's encouraging to be sure, right? This is from Rachel Maddow's blog, and they talk about what's going on with that, and that they're encouraged that he's going to give up, right? So those are some of the reactions you see out there coming from mainstream media. Those are some of the stories that now you don't. It's just going to be that for days, right? It's just going to be that for days. So you can probably turn it off. Oh, is the audio okay? Let me fix it. Is it me or is audio desync? Justin says, yeah, it's out of sync. Okay, let me try something here. I will. Here. Okay. How about that now, guys? Let me know if it audio. Goodness gracious. All right. Okay, it's not that bad. It's a nightmare to fix. Don't. Okay, it's not that. Yeah, it seems better. Yeah. Sometimes you just have to take the change the source of the audio, and it gets back in sync. I think we'll see. So there it is. So those are some of the things you're going to hear. Right now, here's the other side of it. Here's the other side of it. And this is coming from um, and this is coming from well, let's start with DeSantis, right? So DeSantis was heavily criticized for not supporting Trump in the early days of this. And here's what he said: the weaponization of the legal system to advance a political agenda turns the rule of law on its head. It's un-American. The Soros-backed Manhattan DA has consistently bent the law to downgrade felonies and to excuse criminal misconduct. Yet now he is stretching the law to target a political opponent. Florida will not assist in an extradition request given the questionable circumstances at issue with the Soros-backed Manhattan prosecutor and his political agenda. Remember what I predicted when this first became a rumor? That it would actually help understand American federalism better. We would understand the states' rights. We would understand the power of individual legal systems, how they're separate, the role of the federal government, and all this. So I welcome this fight. I don't actually know how it works out. My understanding is the original architects of the Constitution would recognize no Washington, D.C. authority to come into an individual state and prosecute crimes, or at least have extradition and all these things. So my understanding is the states themselves have to agree in the way that America is built. There is no third party arbiter, which is the federal government here. That's not a thing, right? The states are equal. The federal government is equal, and they have to figure this stuff out in bilateral terms or trilateral terms, but not in an adjudicative middle adult federal government way that can force folks to come and do that, right? So my thought is that this will actually help at least change the way Americans have come to see the Federation, with a lot of power in DC and states as sort of B team or minor league compared to the federal government. So I think that's a good thing. I think that seeing that fight, it's what I predicted originally. It's what I predict you're going to see on a lot of these. I saw this thing on JP Morgan. We're going to talk about JP Morgan today. But I saw this Jamie Dimon is cutting the check for some Texas state senators with the mining bill they're trying to pass. Yeah, we'll talk about that. And all miners are in Texas. Yeah. So what I see is the states themselves being forced to carry whatever's left of America into the future and protect what they want to protect. And they're going to do it through infighting. And, I'm not a national divorce guy. The point of US federalism is you just move to another state. They are actual different nations in a sense. And that's why they have secretaries of state. Every state has a secretary of state in order to deal with other states. And a lot of the way things work between different states should be along those lines. So, Having these fights between states' rights and federal government is a good thing for what we're interested in. We continue to be called accelerationists for that, but that's fine, right? This it's accelerationists, right? It's accelerationists, right? Crazy. So that's that part. Let me get a couple more of these quotes. Here's another one about the no one is above the law. It's from Sticks, Hex, and Hammer. He says the Trump indictment does not show that nobody is above the law. It shows rather that anyone who steps out of line and challenges the system will be headhunted after by a lawless legal system. Otherwise, the little quip fails to explain Epstein's client list, right? Indeed, it does. You get we're going to save the best criticism to talk about the next part of this. I just want to get a couple of these out. Here's one from Glenn Beck. He was on Tucker Carlson last night. He said, the Bill of Rights is gone. Nobody is paying attention. Donald Trump is not even a person anymore. He's a symbol. He's a symbol of the average everyday guy that keeps getting screwed every single time. I think I agree with that, right? I think I agree with that. But here's the kicker. Here's the most important thing you're going to hear. And it comes from our favorite leader, Nayib Bukele. What did Bukele say about all this? First of all, he said, so he takes that New York Times article headline that I mentioned. He's going to be fingerprinted. He'll be photographed. He may even be handcuffed. A very visual, very persuasive piece from the New York Times. But Bukele is even more persuasive. So how does he respond to that? He says, imagine if this happened to a leading opposition candidate here in El Salvador. And here's the kill shot. Here is Bukele being the leader of the free world. I mean, I've said it here before. If what I had him drafted in our agenda for Bitcoin 2023, May 18th to 20th, was the leader of the free world. I gave him the title for his session, right? The leader of the free world. Because, of course, I continue to think it's hilarious to think of Joe Biden as the leader of the free world. I mean, nothing could be funnier than watching this guy claim to be the leader of the free world. So Bukele said this, the leader of the free world said this, sadly, it'll be very hard for U.S. foreign policy to use arguments such as democracy and free and fair elections or try to condemn political persecution in other countries from now on. And that's the whole story right there. Honestly, that's the whole story right here. The entire U.S. system was based on a moral high ground argument for years, right? The whole thing was the U.S. dollar, U.S. commercial relationships, all of that must be the main propagating system for commercial activity, economic activity. Everything we do in the world had to be built this way because the US judiciary, the US systems, the US institutions, and the US military formed the foundation of a system that allowed this to be rules-based. Remember, I laughed the other day when we had Michael Cow, Urban Cowboy, who's a big macro analyst, and he was saying, wow, I went to West Point and I produced a document for them that says no one can stop the US dollar's hegemony. It's the US wrecking ball. There's no way, right? And he actually said this in the first sentence, the rules-based system of the United States. And that was his whole thesis, was that people would opt for the rules-based system of the United States over other currencies because it's rules-based. Duh. Right. And I said at the time, what are you talking about? We haven't had an election in how long that we have any credibility in? We are fighting all the time. There's no rules. We're not prosecuting people. This was not long after talking about the Epstein case again. What the hell ever happened to the DA? Remember, we were the only one covering that Biden took an impromptu Christmas vacation. Remember that. Biden took an impromptu Christmas vacation to the Virgin Islands the day after JP Morgan was getting involved. They did a follow the money case. It was Epstein's clients, Ghislaine Maxwell stuff. And what they said was the banks who helped in this owe money now because they helped perpetrate crimes. So the Attorney General of the US Virgin Islands opened up a case on JP Morgan and others. Out of nowhere, Biden goes on vacation right after Christmas down to St. Croix. And what happens? She's fired. She's done. The case is over. It's not happening. We're not going to find out about JP Morgan and their help and all that stuff. And Denise George or something like that, I don't know. I don't remember her exact name. She's just gone. We haven't heard another word from her, right? No one ever put it together. Why is Biden taking an impromptu Christmas vacation to the U.S. Virgin Islands during this time? Well, the small town Biden crime family Probably. I don't know. But what do I know about it? I didn't go to the Virgin Islands, but it looks pretty fishy. Right? It looks pretty fishy. I would like to know more about what's going on. So, so the idea that America can propagate a system where they're now citing themselves as the rule of law purveyors and the fundamental pillar, right? This is like a stool or a table, and it's got a balance of legs. And if you chop off one of these legs, it's not going to hold up anymore. And if you chop them all off, it's going to fall, right? So the judiciary is now in question, exactly as Bukele said. The entire institutional platform of the banks, right? How many people have faith in U.S. banks anymore? What about elections? What about governments, right? I mean, the, this Trump thing is a lot bigger than I think a lot of people realize when you're only looking inwards and at yourself and not understanding the global ramifications. The rest of the world is sitting there saying, if this is the rules based order, why are we following it? They're locking up presidential candidates like a banana republic, right? And now, of course, the war machine we've seen with everything in Ukraine and Russia doesn't look as feared as it once was. I think they could probably handle like Venezuela or Cuba, or the Mexican cartels or Mexico. I don't think they're going to be able to go and fight China. Like, forget Taiwan, right? She's over here right now, the leader of Taiwan. I mean, tell her the truth, guys. We're not coming. We're not going there. Like, you're on your own, right? Semiconductors and all. And I see today Japan is starting to say they're not going to support the Chinese semiconductor industry. They're not going to export parts. We'll see how long that lasts. We'll see if they still believe in the U.S. rules-based order for much longer. So so that whole system is starting to, I think, crumble. And what are we left with, right? What are we left with? Well, let me get to it, right? Vivek Ramaswamy also got involved and said the same thing, right, about doing this to political leaders and the ramifications it has globally for America and what's going on. So here's what Pomp said today about everything that's going on in this context, right? He says the dollar is becoming less popular globally as countries look to diversify, but the dollar value is appreciating against other currencies. So he's saying interesting dynamic to watch. So de-dollarization and strong dollar. A lot of this looks like the inability for people to really predict where things are going. There's some hedging going on. But the Sirius report brought up this really good point that I don't think many people have mentioned before, which is one thing dollar advocates still fail to grasp is there is actually no need to have a world reserve currency. And that's precisely why there will not be one in the future. So he's predicting no world reserve currency in the future, and that the US dollar is not actually needed for all this bilateral trade in the world anymore. And that's kind of what you're seeing now, right? Here's breaking news: Asian finance ministers and central banks to consider dropping US dollar, British pound, euro, and yen, and move to settlements in local currencies. It's happening. This is again from today. Russia, India, China, BRICS are going to create a new shitcoin, right? We've been talking about the shitcoin for a long time coming out of these guys, and it's going to be ready soon for settlement, right? So right away, indeed, you do not need a world reserve currency. I don't think you need a world reserve currency. You might want, and I've always predicted that political dollars will still exist, that a form of fiat will still exist. It's just going to look more like food stamps. It's going to look more like money that is specifically designed for policy objectives. It's not going to be fed by a vacuum and no feedback loop system, which we have now. The reference is going to be Bitcoin. That doesn't mean it's a world reserve currency. It means it's a psychological reference. But what I've been saying for a long time with hyper Bitcoinization, and I actually, I was having a debate with someone the other day about scaling Bitcoin. We couldn't get billions of people on until like 2050 unless we scale it, and da 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 da. Ultimately, one thing that in my story, Satoshi Wedding Murders, I don't get into the details about how Bitcoin scaled, other than this: if everyone has an AI, Bitcoin can actually behave like a rhinestone. It doesn't have to move. It doesn't. It doesn't have to move for every coffee. It doesn't have the velocity. Doesn't have to be there. It can actually be a purely psychological commodity, because AI can actually track it through all of these things. You don't need a virtual machine to set up a transaction order. You can actually catalog a lot of this stuff off chain, believe it or not, right? I think that's possible. If you have a super intelligence associated with every human, if every human has an eyeball and an AI assistant, an eye assistant, and that eye assistant's job is to help manage your Bitcoin, I mean, how many transactions do we really need? In my story, it's rare that there are actual on chain transactions. They happen, but they're an event. Like people celebrate to watch a transaction happen on Bitcoin's ledger. It's like a big deal when it happens. So in my story, it's implied that there is no scaling on chain. The scaling happens psychologically. The scaling happens intellectually, not any other way. Now, I do not know if that's what's going to happen. That was my prediction. That's it. It's just a way to write a story, and I thought it made sense. Indeed, if you start thinking about energy, reference rates, the trickery of all these guys, you don't need a world reserve currency for bills, but you need a world reference rate for energy. It's a totally different instrument. It's a totally different system. And it's the one I think we're building. I think we're building a system where energy will have a non-political reference rate. That non-political reference rate where energy and money are combined to understand economic output. There's no more GDP, no more of that stuff. It's just energy industry, energy policies, and the financing tool with it. As we discussed yesterday with Doomberg's thing, that banking and energy are the two major economic forces that you need to get right in order to propagate your country into the future, your nation into the future, your region into the future, where you're from, right? Those two things being super important. If you actually take those out of the nation state, you have the separation of state and money. And then there is still money the state can deal with. It just has a reference to Bitcoin so that it can't just be conjured with financial engineering and all of the machinations which exist. There is still a way for them to get debt and credit, right? No one's going to stop a government from being able to go into a little bit of debt, just not as much debt as they have. So I think you're going to see a situation soon where energy starts using Bitcoin as the reference rate, where Bitcoin is the market for energy, and it's going to help energy systems explode and innovate and not be held down, because in the end, this system is what held down energy, right? It held it down. It made sure that this had to be compliant with other policy objectives, and they could manipulate the justice system for the moral high ground reasons and say you can't do this and you can't do that. But that's all coming to an end, right? It really is before our eyes changing. And what you can start seeing is if Bitcoin does become this foundation for both energy, it will also help us coordinate our, we're not going to be subjected to this kind of psyop stuff anymore. There's no money in it anymore, right? The politicians will still be put into a box, and they'll have to argue relative to real things, not relative to whatever they think is important. So, yeah, it was called a petrodollar for a reason, precisely. It was called a petrodollar for a reason. And that's what's ending, right? That is what's ending. So indeed, countries can have deals between themselves. Eventually, they're going to all want a reference to understand relative performance, relative strength. And it's not going to be this moral high ground argument anymore. Oh, it's the democratic system country. It's the rules-based order. It's a scam now. And everybody in the world knows it's a scam. Everybody now knows it's a scam. America has exported their infighting around the world. They imported what they created, right? They imported their system of let's go and make a color revolution, and let's fund one side and make sure the elections are not credible, and then let's put a moral high ground party that we agree with because we bestowed the moral high ground stuff on them, and it just rubbed off, and now we're both on the moral high ground, so that's the one you all have to go for, and that kind of stuff. So I don't think that's going to happen anymore. All right, what's this on? This is my Rystone comment. Lightning transactions off chain tied to Bitcoin on chain. Rystone. Oh yeah, don't make me close my channel with you. We'll be in the negotiating this morning cry. Yeah. Yeah. And I look, I'm not even saying it's lightning in my analysis, but that lightning is a precursor to what I'm talking about. It absolutely is. It's a precursor. It is a precursor. Fair trade trousers. I hope you're right about Taiwan, China. Well, I don't think me being right is necessarily a good thing. I just don't think we have the capacity to do it. Like, who's going to fight for Biden? Honestly, if there was a call to arms tomorrow, a call to arms, and you knew as an American, and you were one of these people who was patriotic about America a few years ago, you signed up for Afghanistan or whatever, right? Or you thought, or you were too young to sign up, or whatever was going on, right? That was you. Are you today, with what's going on with Trump, what's going on with Biden, Epstein, all of the Hunter? Are you signing up? Are you fighting for these guys? The numbers are down to nothing. They're down to zero. No one's showing up. Nobody, right? They're not going to get a rush of signups. There ain't no Pearl Harbor coming. There ain't no 9/11 coming. And if there is, I don't even think that would inspire people anymore. No one wants these people around. Nobody. And the other way is true. If Trump was in charge today, you'd have a whole bunch of people as well who'd be like, I'm not going anywhere. We're not fighting, right? So America's severe psychological division means we're not capable. It's not a choice. We're not making a strategic choice about China or Taiwan. We can't do it. Everybody knows we can't do it. We would get our asses kicked. It's not going to happen, right? Because no one's going to show up. And our yeah, we got some great weapons, but we're going to be fighting about using them the whole time, right? We're going to be fighting about using them the whole time. So I don't see it happening. Could be wrong. I could be wrong. See some of the Trump stuff. I think going after Trump is a bad. Of course it is. Yeah, you will only bring attention to him. Going after political opponents is absolutely, absolutely. And remember, Trump is best when he has a adversary, when he's got a person to fight. He kind of needs one. He can't really define himself in. People have been saying, "Oh, he's been beating up on DeSantis so much," and he has nothing to say unless he's attacking someone. Sometimes, I mean, he had that brilliant cities, freedom cities. That was great, but people don't want to hear about just positive stuff all the time. At least in his base, right? They want to hear him with the crooked Hillary stuff and the fighting. He was a wrestler and he was on WWE for a long time, right? That's what we love about him sometimes, right? He's been stone cold stunned more than anyone. Like, I don't want. They're a little too young to be techs right now. Fair trade trousers. They had me this morning trying to fix their own iPad, so they're not quite there. All good. Good, Louis. CK says, "How do we get 100 Bitcoiners to watch the Breakup live?" We're getting to 100 views by noon usually. So before noon, we're crossing 100. So it's not quite live. We're getting there, though. We're getting there. Bill of Rights Amendment X. Yeah, I don't think we can pass Bill of Rights amendments right now. The defendant, the federal government, and the DNC. Yeah. Georgia has more mining than Texas. Really? I didn't know that. Local first. Very good news count. Yeah, I love what you do. Thanks, man. I'm really going after Trump as a bad move. Oh, yeah, sorry. I already read that one. Oh, did I read that one too? Oh, no, it came twice. I get it. If mining becomes centralized in states that aren't antagonistic towards it, it'll become easier for the federal government to shut it down. Well, it's already pretty centralized in a few states, and they did a good job in New York shutting things down. But Texas there is a lot of feeling in Texas that they won't listen to the federal government anyway. So if you start doing the math on like, for example, you want to make Quebec, where I'm from, Quebec and Texas are very similar, right? They are the two sub-federal states in their country that are the most distinct. They're the only two where you see the local state flag more than the federal flag. They're the only two that really think of themselves as a country, even though all states are, they don't have that identity. And it's the same in Canada. Ontario does not have a separate identity, like the Toronto area does not have a separate identity than Canada. It is the Canadian identity, much like California is and New York is the American identity. Texas is its own thing. And Quebec is its own thing. And if you want to make something popular in Quebec, just have the federal government tell them they can't do it. Anything you want. And Texas is identical to that. So human psychology will play a role in this. And it's not like the state governments in Texas are going to be like, oh, Joe Biden, what did you? Oh, we'll do that, right? So I encourage J.P. Morgan to pick a fight with Texas miners. I would love to see it. It would be amazing. A banker versus a Texan miner. I got my money on the Texan miner. I really do. I don't care how much money J.P. Morgan has. Doesn't scare me. Yeah, I know those guys. I was just on the phone all day with, or hours yesterday with Odell talking Bitcoin 2023. We're talking about you, Justin. Your name came up a couple of times. So we got some stuff for you that's brewing. Justin, who maybe is still in the audience. So there you go. Yeah, I wouldn't sign up for wars. I think that's pretty widely felt these days. I mean, I just can't imagine a lot of these young people going to do it, right? X is meant. Oh yeah, the 10th Amendment. Yeah, yeah, exactly. Good point about Texas. Yeah. Pennsylvania is using coal and nuclear power to Bitcoin. Yeah, yeah, the nuclear one's great. Yeah, Pennsylvania again. Once you get commercial interests involved, it becomes harder in the corrupted American system to stop it. Um, yeah, ordinary Bitcoin, absolutely more decentralized. I think that's going to be one of the big ramifications. I think I did a show on it a few days ago. The whole point, like, I think even linguistically, we'll go from saying the United States is to the United States are after this World War III thing. I mean, that's the World War III in a nutshell, right there. The United States are, and it's definitely going to happen. I think income tax is dead, boo boo. I don't think it makes it through this. I think the Federal Reserve and the IRS were created simultaneously, and they'll die together too. I've said that since I have said those exact words. The Federal Reserve and the IRS came into the world together, and they will die together too. I've been saying that since 2013, 2014. That was one of the first like epiphanies that I had about Bitcoin, that they would kill the taxation. Because when I did my study with the Senate of Canada, that was one of the big things they were curious about. How are you going to tax? And I would go to our little Bitcoin hangout spot in Toronto. Vitalik Buterin would be there, and all of these other people, and I would, we would just be talking. It was just a small group of people. And I would say, well, what about the taxes thing? And they're like, well, it'll be just about people paying honestly on their own. And you could make systems where it automatically taxes in consumption, but income is going to be a little different. It's going to be harder because of privacy. And so my thought immediately was, well, we're going to have to, just like with crime, right? Because the main argument was always, well, what about money laundering? Well, remember, the reason I even got into Bitcoin was because I was running a study in 2011, 2012 about federalism. The IRS, Social Security came. Sorry, yeah. The federal income tax was ratified. Yeah. Pardon me. So it's the federal income tax that I'm talking about. There will still be a federal revenue service because there's still going to be consumption taxes. I believe consumption taxes are going to go way up, which I'm fine with. Which I'm totally fine with. But the situation for state devolution of power, or just the way they would change, and the way income tax would change and individual states would change for taxation, more or less, is states themselves. Because it's the flag theory that Bitcoiners are so familiar with, right? Which states are giving you a better deal, which states are giving you a worse deal. You're going to see a lot of human migration between them, and it's going to become a lot more clear which systems work. So when I was talking with those folks, at the time it was like, okay, when I got into Bitcoin in 2012, running this study, the whole point was, so my foray into this was the following. I was in a position where you're looking at studies, right? And you want a study that is going to get news amplification of another issue that you're interested in propagating. In our case, it was international organizations and supranational organizations telling little Canadian farmers what to do, right? And that was politically a wedge issue for us. So I had to sit around and look for things that I thought would be interesting to talk about, study. And this thing came to me. It was a statutory review of the anti-money laundering, anti-terrorism financing regime in Canada. And what I had heard from a lot of state lobbyists in Canada, so in Canada, the federal banking situation is one of the main differences with U.S. federalism, insofar as the way the federation is constructed. In the United States, banks are state chartered, and in Canada, we made them all federally chartered. The states can charter co-ops and other different financial institutions. These guys came to us and complained that the terrorism financing regime didn't fit their corporate model because they didn't have a head office where they can send compliance to. The nature of a co-op is these are little franchises, and they had to do all of their compliance internally. So they weren't able to hire loan officers for small farmers. They weren't able to hire loan officers for small businesses, for local anything, because they had to hire a compliance officer and do all this stuff. And what I saw was a great political issue. And then I found out about the terrorism financing regime was all from Paris, FinCEN, FinTrack, all answer to FATF, the name and shame system. And I learned the most important thing before I got the study going, which was they don't actually prosecute anyone. So it was all useless. It never actually amounted to anything. And yet it had a major commercial implication in Canada. So I went into this naively, right? I didn't understand this was a big global order. And I actually got our prime minister at the time to say, rip it up, kill them. If you need to destroy this institution, destroy it, right? Because it looks like a stupid thing. And he could see right away this was a big political win if we got it right. So indeed, it was a political win. We didn't give them, their whole plan is the $10,000 thing at the border. They didn't get it, right? We made them, they wanted to go down to Australia, $1, right? Like every dollar that comes in and out, they wanted a report, a financial tracking of it. And so we said, no, we'd give them nothing. We didn't do anything like that. And it was within that study that I learned about Bitcoin, because we were interviewing FBI guys and they were like, wait till you get a load of this. And I was like, well, what's this? And so with where I was in, experience or whatever, that was in 2012. I led an effort in 2013 to get the Canadian Senate to study Bitcoin in a way that was different than anyone else had ever studied it. We weren't there to look at just criminality and what are the dangers. We're like, wow, this could be good. But we had to address those questions about money laundering. So our answer was, well, the police have to do their jobs. They can't just deputize the banks anymore. They have to get out and do their jobs and catch criminals. And that was reality. And the taxation argument became the same, right? It was, well, they're going to have to figure out how to get people to pay taxes because there's no way they can just catch it through an employer necessarily. So there you go. All right, team. That's about all I got on a fun day. Lots going on. Local first and freely associate in the U.S. State of my choice. I think I like that. Yeah, you're not going to need a national divorce. The whole point of the federation is that there's the flexibility. I think everything we have is there. I don't think we need to create anything. I think we just go about our lives and it's going to work out. Going to go waste your time exercising. Well, exercising is good, right? But as we know from today, it does nothing for you. It's no good. You're not going to get any mental health out of it. P-Man Van, there's no mental health coming. Peace to you.